welcome back to another episode of DNA Live. My name is Jeff Wright. I'm joined today immediately by the president of the DNA, Scott Allen, and Vice President Dwight Vogt. Dwight, welcome to DNA Live. You actually exist in a hidden episode that's stored away in the vault somewhere.
That's right.
You've been
in shown super censored video.
That's right. Nothing in bad taste. It just never made it. It just never made it to the internet. It was one of those weeks where we had a technical difficulty, and that'll be bonus content someday. I was about to say on the DVD, but no one watches DVDs anymore, right? So that'll be bonus someday on our YouTube
on the cassette player.
Yeah. So speaking of our YouTube channel, let me just say hello to everyone. We're so glad you're here. Make sure you say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. We are part of the Disciple Nations Alliance. We're an organization that exists to serve the church, to help equip her to be God's principal agent of transformation in healing, blessing, restoring broken communities. We do that through training, through providing resources, through networking, practitioners, those who apply biblical principles around the world. And speaking of content and resources, we are so close to getting our YouTube channel up and running to provide these same videos and other videos on a regular basis to a wider audience that might not be able to join us here on Facebook. We also are so close to having these in audio format on Buzzsprout and any other podcasting platform that you prefer. And then also what we've been excited about most recently is we have Scott Allen's book, Why Social Justice is Not Biblical Justice. This has been out, Scott, for a month and a few days now, right? A month and a week.
It has, yeah. It's been out just over a month, and I'm so happy with how well it's doing. I was just doing some research on that this morning, and thanks for everybody for buying it. And please help us continue to get the word out. So
yeah. So if you want to get this book in your hand, you can go to Amazon. You can find it in paperback. You can find it on Kindle, on any e-reader you prefer. And the audiobook has been submitted for approval. So they're doing that work right now, and it should be live as soon as it gets through that process. Also, if you are involved in a ministry, if you are looking to share this resource with a large group of people, please get in touch with us at the office as well. info@disciplenations.org, or you can go to our website, disciplenations.org, find out how to get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to work with you as well. Also, if we're coming into the end of the year here, I don't share this much on here, but one of the hats I wear in this office is development, fundraising. We're in the last quarter here, by the grace of God, even with the coronavirus and the effects it's had economically on many people. We've had a decent year, but we're really looking to close the gap as this year closes, and make sure we have the resources, the financial resources we need to continue to create content and equip the global church with tools to disciple the nations, to help transform communities. So if you're interested in supporting the work we do, if you're watching this now, if you're listening later, you can go to disciplenations.org/donate, and you can make a gift to Disciple Nations. We really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, gentlemen. Come on back, Dwight. Come on back. How are you?
I'm still listening.
Good. So, Scott, this is fun. It's we could be around the conference table where I'm sitting right now. It's the DNA crew today. So we've been on the theme of ideological social justice, as you call it in your book. This comprehensive worldview that is, has been mainlined everywhere over the past few months. And we've had some great guests on to kind of dive into that. And now we, as an organization that was born in a relief and development organization with a heart for helping communities, helping people flourish. We wanted to take today to talk about the fruit, the consequences, the practical results of worldviews, right?
Yeah.
And in your book, you say, I think chapter 7 or 8, when you really bring it home. If you're working through the book, guys, the earlier chapters are great to really get your head around this, especially if it's your first exposure to this. And then chapters, not to, I can't pat you on the back through here, Scott, but chapters 7 and 8, you really bring it home. And in one of those later chapters, I don't know if it's the last one or the second to last one, you say, let's not just be anti-social justice, let's be pro-biblical justice. Let's be pro-biblical worldview. And so I was hoping today we could talk about the good fruit that comes from good trees. And maybe, I don't know how much we need to talk about the bad fruit that comes from bad trees, but when you got good fruit in front of you, you don't go looking for the bad fruit, right? So let's, I don't know how you want to get this rolling, but I think.
Well, maybe I can set it up a little bit, Jeff,
Yeah.
Because I've been out talking about the book, doing interviews and whatnot, and of course, researching over the last year or so. And here's some observations I'd like to make just in terms of the broad lay of the land. One of the things we champion at the DNA from the very beginning is a very biblical approach to compassion, to justice and human flourishing. What shape does the Bible give to an approach to helping people flourish and thrive? And what I've noticed is that because of the history of the church in the United States, let me just talk a little bit of history. If you go back 100 years or so, there was a rift in the church in our country and in the West. It affected the church all over the world. We talk a lot about it in our training. And it had to do with this subject, frankly. There was a lot of heretical ideas that were coming in from Europe at that time. We're talking about late 1800s, early 1900s, especially when as it related to kind of biblical hermeneutics and things like this. And with that came this idea that we Christians can kind of usher in the kingdom of God through human wisdom and kind of enlightened government policy through something that became known as the social gospel. And it really was a heretical teaching. It kind of denied human sinfulness. It taught that through, again, enlightened government policy, we could kind of equalize outcomes and create this really beautiful kind of world. And a lot of the church kind of lobbed onto that. And as it did so, it lost sight of a biblical theology for justice and compassion. In reaction to that, the fundamentalist church said, no, that's really heretical teaching. We have to actually keep emphasizing the basics or the fundamentals. So we have to talk about evangelism. We have to talk about human sinfulness, the need for an atonement, the authority of the Bible, really important things. And I'm so thankful for people that championed that movement to uphold the authority of the Bible. These would be people like J. Gresham Machen, the founder of Westminster Theological Seminary, R.A. Torrey, one of the founders of Biola University, and many others. And now the mistake that they made, however, was that they reacted against the social gospel. And so they said, no, really this idea of Christians involved in justice, compassion, care for the poor, etc., it's really not something we should focus on. They didn't go so far as to say it's not important, but they said it's less important than these more important things. And so what that did, unfortunately, is for generations, this understanding from the Bible of what does it mean to impact culture, cause it to flourish, help the poor, it was kind of lost. And so because you had on one side, you had people that were kind of promoting a heretical approach, the social gospel, and on the other side, you had people just saying, let's not talk about it at all. And so it was lost. Now, fast forward to the present, and I think we're kind of in a similar place today. You see a lot of young people, young evangelicals, and I think they rightly are saying, you know, I just didn't grow up in a home or in a church where issues of compassion and justice and concern for the poor were really emphasized. And I think that's wrong. I think that's not biblical. And they're right to feel that way. But because there's not been a biblical theology that's been on offer to help them to know what that would look like, they're picking up the thing that is on offer right now, which is this kind of counterfeit approach to justice and compassion called ideological social justice, which is actually damaging to the poor. And I think, you know, we had Neil Shenvi on last week, and Neil said, I thought it was very interesting, he says the entryway, the gateway for young people into this ideology is compassion. They want to be compassionate. They want to help the poor and the needy and the oppressed. And I totally agree with that. So what you've got now, right now, I think, is you've got ideological social justice kind of saying this is the way you care for the poor and the oppressed. You've got a lot of young Christians and actually a lot of Christian leaders saying, yeah, that's right. And then you've got a much smaller group saying, well, that's not right. That's really kind of Marxist and it's wrong. And actually right too. And I'm with those guys that are saying this is wrong. But what they're not offering is the biblical alternative. I feel like that's the voice that's not out there being represented in the culture right now. And I really want us as the DNA to come back and say, okay, the motivation is right. The content is wrong. We've got to offer the right kind of content that actually helps people in a biblical way to flourish, that helps the poor and the needy and the oppressed. And so anyways, that's just some setup. I really do feel like it's kind of lost knowledge. I'm not saying completely. There's certainly people out there promoting it, but not many. Dwight, I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of the lay of the land. Like who's out there really promoting a genuinely biblical approach to these things that that you see?
Well, I think first thought that comes to mind is Steve Corbett and Brian Fickard with When Helping Hurts. And
Yes.
They wrote that book that's just a bestseller in the evangelical community, I believe. And by the way, I heard this morning, Steve emailed me back saying he will join us November 6th. And so I told Jeff that Steve Corbett will make him look like a wilting flower in comparison because he's so energetic.
Is that a dare? Is that a dare?
Yeah, it's a dare. It's a dare. But anyway, Steve's going to join us, and I'm excited about that.
For those of you who don't know Steve, by the way, he's the co-author of When Helping Hurts. You've probably heard of that book. And Steve, Dwight, and I were colleagues at Food for the Hungry for many years. And we were kind of mentored in our biblical theology of community development work by Darrow Miller. And so these ideas have been kind of percolated through the DNA as well as the Chalmers Center as well. So.
And a big strength of that book is how do you help people without undermining their dignity, meaning dignity is core. And anyway, I think that's a good starting point. So, Scott,
there's not many though. I don't think there's too many. We've become familiar with the Woodson Center and the Woodson Institute and a few others, but
I know of international organizations that have worked long and hard to think through the processes for community development and what that means and what are some of the root issues and where worldview plays a role. In fact, the majority of DNA affiliates are organizations, either missions or relief and development organizations, that realize that to impact people at a sustainable level, we're talking not just a month or a year, but 10 years, and actually bring change that continues to change and change and change, you must address worldview issues. Mm-hmm. Because if there's worldview issues at the core, history repeats itself. And I can give you stories and stories about that, but that's for later shows, I think, in November. So. Well, it matters. Oh, worldview matters. That's all I want to say. Yeah.
That's right. Well, and I want to open the door to anyone watching or listening. We don't have our pulse on everything going on. And as you mentioned, our affiliates, Dwight, I mean, we're always looking to partner with, exchange ideas with, network with like-minded organizations and people. So if you know anyone, if anyone's on your radar, listener, viewer, please let us know. And, we'd be happy to exchange resources, try to network people on the ground around the world. My observation of this, Scott, there's direct parallels today of both camps that you mentioned in the historical example you gave. And the DNA, and my disclaimer is I don't mean this in that we're wishy-washy and moderate, but the DNA often finds itself in a spot where it's trying to prevent Christians from falling over either side of the cliff.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right. That's right.
And so I've been in the room with many people that, and these are all well-intentioned people, right? Again, a lot of these come from rooted in very good qualities, compassion and things like that. People in the room that it is all about, right, the social aspect of it, right? And then this week even, I've been in the room with people that if I were to hand them a DNA book and they get to chapter 7 of this most recent one and they go, oh, wait a second, so I'm actually supposed to respond some way, then that's a jolt back towards that edge of the cliff, right? Or back away from that edge of the cliff. There's a piece missing where there's the application of what we believe that leads to flourishing for some parties as well.
I wonder if we can, Jeff, maybe get into some of the specifics, because I'd like to kind of compare and contrast a little bit this worldview of ideological social justice that purports to be for human flourishing, compassion, and standing up for the oppressed.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Black Lives Matter advocates for positive change in the Black community. Presumably that's what they want to see. So you have to say, well, what are they putting on tap to deliver that? And how is it, is it actually going to live up to its promise versus what does the Bible teach about how you might uplift a community that's struggling like the African American community or any community anywhere in the world that's struggling with oppression, poverty, or whatnot. So because I'd love to, we want to kind of begin to flesh out kind of what does a biblical approach look like vis-a-vis, what is being offered by ideological social justice.
Yeah.
So, I thought maybe one place to start, one of the things as I started studying this worldview of what I call ideological social justice was really just how it viewed people, how it viewed human beings. And one of the most striking things about this worldview is that it sees us primarily, it sees our identity being primarily formed and shaped by groups, and particularly groups based on race or skin color, sex, or sexual orientation. So, when it comes to race or skin color, I am white. That's what defines me more than anything else. Or I am Black, somebody else would say, and that's what defines me. And, or I am gay, and gay is not just a sexual lifestyle choice. It's my identity. It's who I am, or I'm transgendered, or whatever it is. So that's a very powerful idea in ideological social justice. In the book, I write about a picture of this, an example of this that I saw in a famous YouTube video that came out a few years ago. And it was this confrontation at Yale University between students and a professor named Christakis. The professor was white guy, and the students were largely Black and Hispanic, I think, mostly Black. And there was one moment in that exchange, it was a really angry exchange. And the students were confronting him. They had him in a circle. He was in the middle, and they were yelling at him and using profane language. And it was shocking because of the disrespect. But one of the students, this young Black guy, got right up in Professor Christakis' face. And, Professor Christakis made this point. He says, I'm not interested in what divides us, but what we have in common, our common humanity. He's not a Christian. I don't think he's Jewish. I'm not exactly sure what his belief systems are, but he says, I'm interested in our common humanity, the things that unite us. And the student responded this way, and I thought it was really telling. He said, look at me, look at me, look me in the eye. Your experience will never connect to mine. And what I heard him say there was, as a Black person, me and you as a white person, we live in completely separate silos or different realities. We cannot understand each other. You just can't understand what it means to be Black, and I won't understand what it means to be white. And because that's what defines us, is skin color. So it's a very powerful idea. The problem with this idea, though, is you lose track. What gets lost is the individual. You don't see people as individuals with responsibility or with agency that can actually make a difference. The individual becomes kind of a zero. In fact, Dwight, I know you want to talk about the biblical kind of counter to this, but let me just read, if I could, just my book here. I got a quote. Nancy Pearcey, who's just been such a great teacher to all of us on worldview. She writes this about this ideology of social justice and its view of people. She says, everyone's ideas are social constructions that are stitched together by cultural forces. Individuals are little more than mouthpieces for communities based on race, class, gender, ethnicity, and sexual identity. Jordan Peterson goes on and he agrees. He says, ideological social justice denies the existence of the individual. It claims that you are nothing more than an avatar of your particular group. And then I write, the ramifications of this idea are really profound because it reduces people to puppets of social forces that are powerless to rise above the communities to which they belong. Now, if you believe that, that's going to be a huge barrier to kind of flourishing, human flourishing. I've talked long enough, Dwight. I want to get your thoughts on kind of what the biblical counterpoint to that is.
Dwight, can I say something first?
Yeah.
Just to bring it, I'm the DNA basics guy. You guys are up here and I bring it, but this is one example, and it doesn't have to be ideological social justice. It could be any other worldview set there is out there. But this is one example of where, we can witness this now in our culture, is that the presuppositions that are baked into a worldview, right? There's very mutually exclusive presuppositions when you compare different worldviews. But you can see in culture the acceptance of those presuppositions, those
ideas,
those ideas, and then you start. So you're claiming to operate with a different set of lenses on, but you're 2 steps further downstream, and you're trying to reconcile something in which you've already conceded the presuppositions of the false narrative, right? And so in this example, it's identity, and it's not just identity, it's that the color of my skin, my ethnicity, my sexual preference, those are my identity, and
that's who I am,
right? And so when you talk about diversity, it's only diversity of these things, right?
Yeah, those categories.
And when you're talking about diversity at that level, you've already accepted those presuppositions, which I think if biblically we can reject those on some level.
Yeah. So that's right, Jeff. But let's talk about, Dwight, I want to hear your thoughts on how, the Bible has a very different view of these things that's essential for human flourishing or genuine.
Sometimes I'll be honest to you and whoever's listening. This is the most confusing worldview I've ever seen. And we look as a DNA at animism, we look at modernism, we look at postmodernism. But somehow this one is just really hard to get my mind around. And that's, anyways, I don't know if that's your experience or not, but.
Dwight, I think it actually, if I could just say one thing, and I want to hear from you, but I think what helps me make sense of why people think this way is this. They start from the assumption that we're not created, there is no God. We're just products of evolution. We're just, and we just happen to evolve in different ways with different skin colors or sexual preferences. And if there is no God and we just kind of are this collection of matter that are lumped into different groups, then the most important thing in shaping us isn't God, it's social forces.
It's our environment.
It's our environment. Exactly. It's our social forces, the environment.
We are the
That's
products
who we are.
of
We're
our
products of our environment, our culture, and we can't transcend that.
So if you,
I kind of get that. If you start from that starting point, it does kind of make sense.
yeah, and that's actually, you just stole my point, Scott. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm going to
Moving on. Okay.
mute.
No. I wrote the book, Made to Flourish, sell my book here. And I realized I was thinking
On
about
Amazon.
the 4 points I made, or the 5 points, the last one, but I made a big assumption in writing that. And that assumption is I stepped right over, you mentioned it earlier, human agency. And it's built into it, but I was thinking about, no matter what you think, whether you're postmodern or wherever you're coming from worldview wise, you have to eventually deal with this question of human agency. And interesting, I'm reading Jamar Tisby's The Color of Compromise, and I'm trying to figure out where he's coming from. And finally, he says 3 things that made sense. And one of them was about human agency, and the other was this thing, we're products of our society. And all at once, I'm making sense. It's like, you are the product of your society, and human agency is actually bad. Human agency leads to individualism, and all you care about is yourself and your family, and to the exclusion of others. And you
Let me just insert something right there, Dwight. What I've learned in talking to people that have really absorbed this worldview is they really react negatively to talk of the individual. They call it individualism, and
right.
It's bad. Yeah.
Well, and individualism as a theory is narcissism at a social level. I mean, and if you've ever been, Deborah's a counselor, and she says one of the most challenging clients you can have is a narcissist, because they're just insatiably selfish. And if that's what and this is saying that individual accountability, which is what accountability leads to individualism, well, then you're in trouble. But the biblical view of that is, no, individual agency leads to social agency. It means, the first commandment is love your God, and the second one is love your neighbor. And but anyway, I just want to give me 2 minutes. I want to say something about this idea of individual agency. I think it's core to who we are, and if we don't recognize it, we're in trouble, no matter what culture we're in, no matter what level of poverty we have. Because I remember reading Scott Peck, Road Less Traveled, the bestseller years ago, and the first sentence in the book is, life is difficult. Life is difficult. And I'm thinking, yeah, life is difficult. And we face that as a DNA. We see that in Africa. We see that in Latin America. We see that in Asia. We've seen that in socialist countries. We've seen that in countries led by dictators, and in democratic countries. Life is difficult, and there are problems. There are poverty. There are huge things. And I think we're right in turning to Genesis 1, where you figure out who is mankind, and God says, first of all, be fruitful. God blessed male and female and said, be fruitful. And our friend Arturo Kuba makes a big deal out of that, and I really appreciate that for them. He says, that's what we're about. And then God says, rule over creation. That's human agency, rule over creation. And then he says, work the garden, chapter 2. So immediately God, the focus is, and throughout scripture, is Israel important as a nation? Yes, but God's calling people to repentance. God deals with individuals to bring about change at the societal level. Time and time again, we see him working through the individual agency of man to bring out change at the social level, because the social level does impact our lives. Terribly impacts it sometimes. But at the end of the day, if we lose our ability to act as human agents with the power of God to help us, we got nothing. I mean, we are in the ultimate prison, because, and if you look at history, you see that the people who we most admire were the ones that were really in a prison of their environment and were able to overcome it. I mean, the Helen Kellers, the George Washington Carvers, the Joan of Arcs, Solzhenitsyn or whoever, we just terribly admire those people because they recognize that God, their ultimate responsibility was to God and to living out the person they were called to be. And I feel like CRT says that part doesn't count. You're just a product of your environment. And unless we can get rid of racism, you will always live oppressed. You will always live in a non-flourishing existence. You have no hope. And that's pretty discouraging. So human agency.
Yeah, Dwight, one of the things that I think is really important, the Bible, on this issue of individual group, the Bible actually puts forward this powerful balance between those things. In other words, it affirms them both. And I think affirming both of them really is essential for human flourishing.
Absolutely.
It's like a road, and it's got ditches on both sides, and you can go into the ditch on either side and you'll end up in poverty and brokenness. And the ditch on one side is to just focus kind of radically on the individual and downplay any kind of community, the need for community, families, nations, whatever it is. I can do this on my own.
Well, and that's not a biblical
individualism. Yeah.
That's not a biblical definition of human agency either, I don't think, because God never says you be you just for the sake of you. Develop yourself so you can benefit alone. He's always saying, no, you live for others.
Exactly.
But if you don't control your own life, there's no way you're going to help anybody else.
Exactly. Now, the other side of the other ditch is really the one that ideological social justice or critical theory falls into, which is the individual doesn't matter. What all that matters is the group that you belong to. And I lived in Japan for many years. As a culture, it's very similar. It emphasized the group. And it downplayed the individual. There was a little saying in Japan that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, that you as an individual, that's the nail sticking up, don't matter. You need to get pounded down into the group, and your identity is completely shaped by group. That doesn't lead to flourishing either, because what it does is it takes away any impetus to use the unique gifts and abilities that God has given me to make change in the world. So the Bible emphasizes both, and you can see this, for example, in how God in Genesis chapter 12, 1 and 2 raises up a man, Abraham. And he, says, I want you and your wife go and, leave, and I'm gonna make you into a nation. So there's the group, but it starts with one. And I'm going to use you as a man and a group, the nation that comes from you, to bless the whole world. So both of these things matter. The individual matters. As Darrell always says, it's, the individual, God, the Bible puts forward this powerful view of the importance of each and every individual, because they've been made by God with agency and responsibility and the ability to create and to make new things and to bless the world. And any worldview that denies that or doesn't uphold that is ultimately going to lead to bad outcomes. So anyways, I think, like you were saying, Dwight, it's the critical theory that it's going off onto the ditch on one side of saying, no, the individual doesn't matter. So,
and as soon as you do that, there's no way we can create a utopian enough world to create perfect people.
Yeah.
You just can't. It's funny. I got one more thing. I thought about two young friends that I know. Let's call them Pete and Joe. But both of them, you think about white culture, and is that the problem? And it might, there's problems in every culture. And but it's interesting. I reflected on it. These two young men, they grew up in homes as nice as ours. They grew up with families, had dads and moms. Well, the one didn't have a dad. They went to the same schools as my children. And both of them had food to eat and everything you'd want, TV and whatever, their gadgets. But both of them struggle mightily. In fact, one took his life, and the other one is struggling today, and we see him frequently. But what they didn't get is this idea that it's the development of their, going back to this, their internal agency. They just are not convinced they can control life at all. And without that volition, without that belief, without that strength of moral will or strength of character, whatever you call that thing that's deep inside you that God implants us, without that being nurtured and developed, we're in trouble, you know.
Absolutely.
And so my wife, with our kids, the kid pictures behind us, I didn't do this consciously, but the most important thing I could give them was that sense of you've got something within you that it's up to you,
Yeah.
It's up to you.
It's so important, Dwight, and we can think of so many examples. You're talking, I'm thinking of Arturo Cuba's example again that we use so often of his work with the Pocumchi in Guatemala. They were not, obviously this is an indigenous tribe of Indians. They weren't, into critical social theory.
No, but animism.
They were animists, but the animists have a very similar view that your life doesn't matter because you're controlled by these forces that are more powerful than you.
Right.
And it downplays individual agency and the ability of the individual to bring about change. And so he tells the story, and many of you probably heard the story of, every year, right, they would go out and plant their corn, and every year rats would go into the fields and eat over half of that crop. And if you ask these Pocumchi, why don't you do something about that? It didn't even occur to them that they could. That was their worldview lens.
All right.
Their rats always have eaten half the crop ever since, I've been alive. And not just me, but my parents, grandparents, all the way back. They always do this. What do you expect? And Arturo had to go back with them into the Bible. They were Christians, but they hadn't been discipled with this knowledge of the power of the individual. And he had to go back with them into Genesis and into those just basic verses, Genesis chapter 1, where God says, I'm going to make them male and female in my image and give them the right to rule, to have dominion over creation. And then he said, who's ruling here? Do you have dominion or the rats? And they said, well, the rats. And he says, well, should it be that way? No. Well, then what are you going to do about it? And it was such a light bulb. They said, oh, we can do something. And they created, a system for protecting the corn, a kind of corn cribs, all on their own with their own resources, their own human, that was their agency, their volition exercised for the first time because they understood we can make a difference. We can have an impact. So your point, Dwight, is right. If people don't see that, any worldview that moves you away from that and puts you into a group where your life doesn't matter and you can't do anything to change your circumstances is going to lead to bad outcomes. Everyone.
So that people listening aren't falling off the other end of the cliff now.
Yeah, we need to go there.
Flesh out.
You're right.
Flesh out what Christian community looks like. Being a part of a body of believers, being a part of a community with individualism.
Go ahead, Dwight.
Yeah, I think that one of the best things we can do is ask, what is it about your environment that we contribute to? Let's say we're white, systemic racists. What part of your environment is it that we contribute to that you feel is limiting you? And just ask the specific. I can't imagine. I think environment does shape people, and I can't change your environment, but I can contribute to it. I can either contribute negatively or I can contribute positively. And I think as the church, we need to step back and go, what can we do to contribute positively and not negatively? If that means taking down a statue, let's go out and rip that statue down, because I don't want that working against your belief that you can make a difference in this world, that you're loved by God and important and have capabilities that God wants you to develop and use to benefit. If that's going to stop all that, take it down tomorrow. Any statue, take it down if that's going to hurt you. But I think we need to be we at least need to say, how are we affecting the environment, and think about it as a church. And I think people say, oh, you're all radical individualists. You don't think, you don't care. You don't care anything about what kind of negative environment you're creating for people. So just a thought.
Scott?
Well, yeah, the biblical view of community is deep. It goes all the way back to the Godhead himself. God is a community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so this idea of kind of the importance of the individual and the importance of community is just so deeply woven into not just Christianity, but reality. So you just have to really affirm them both. And I think that the biblical view of community, you see it right away in Genesis. It's not good for Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. And so, here's Eve, right, is created, who's like him but different. This is kind of genuine diversity, I think, so there's a unity, but there's a diversity, and the biblical worldview affirms them both. They're both really important. She's like him. They're both made in God's image, but she's different, and she's complementary. And that's so essential. We need each other. And so God creates this kind of environment where he creates marriage. When marriage is created, Adam and Eve don't lose their identity. They're still Adam and Eve, but they're now in this body that kind of mutual service. Really, that's the idea too, is that biblical community is one of mutual service. It's bringing the gifts that you have to bear to, into a group where those gifts are needed, and you actually need the gifts of other people. So God's woven that very deeply into creation. Both of those things have to be affirmed. I think, again, my deep concern with the ideology of critical theory or social justice is that it's losing sight of the individual. And boy, it's so destructive. I just emphasize that enough. If people feel like, I don't mean to pick on Michelle Obama, but I heard her speak the other day. It was a graduation ceremony. She was speaking to a group of young Black people at a school. And she was talking about how, unfortunately, they were going to be raised in a society that was systemically racist. And those systems were structured to prevent them from flourishing. And she essentially said this: I'm sorry, but there's really not a lot you can do about that. And I thought that's probably the very worst thing that you could say to anyone.
It's interesting. I want to make a couple of responses to what you just said, Scott, and that's troubling as well. I think two things I want to say. One is the criticism, I think, of evangelical white Christians is that we get community, but we get it at a very level. We have very small communities. It's either my family, maybe your family, maybe it's my church, maybe it's my denomination, but that's the extent of our community. We care about those people. If they get sick, we're the first ones there. If somebody's struggling, we're there. They need a loan, we're there. But when it gets beyond our community, we got nothing. We don't care. And maybe we don't enough. I mean, we got the Great Commission to go into all the nation, to cross cultural barriers for the gospel. But I think it's much more difficult to cross cultural barriers with our extension of our community. I'll be honest, I usually don't consider the homeless person part of my community. Now, he's in another community. It's called the homeless community. But maybe I should. And if he is part of it, then I go, hey, what do I need to do to help you get some human moral agency going? And what do I need to do to help you move towards God's design for your life? Because that's ultimately what's going to help us flourish. It's not about food and water even. It's about aligning ourselves with God's design.
Exactly.
And the other thing was, I can't remember, but that's the big one, I guess.
I was going to say, just on your last point, Jeff, I'd love to hear your thoughts too on this, but I was really struck by a book I read a few years back by Arthur Brooks, and he was the former president of the American Enterprise Institute. He's a really engaging guy, and he writes a lot on happiness. What does it mean to truly be happy? And he says it's actually a question that has received a ton of study And so there's actual real, data that kind of back up what it means to have a happy or a flourishing life. And he said one of the key things that leads to happiness is what he says this idea of earned success. And that is taking in other words, it's making something with your life, working, because then you've earned something, success. I've started a business, and with my own creativity and my own kind of initiative, with the help of others, of course, but it was my idea and I started it. And now it's flourishing, and I'm able to employ other people and help their lives to improve. He says that is one of the keys to human flourishing. And you can't have that unless you uphold a culture where the importance of the individual matters. They can use their creativity and their gifts to create new things, like new businesses or corn cribs or whatever it is. It's just such a powerful thing. And so any biblical approach to community development and community flourishing has to really uphold that idea that individual lives really matter. And again,
I remember my point, Scott.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, and it relates back to you. Sorry, Jeff, if you want to interject. But it's this idea of, I was struck by Michelle. You can't have it. You can't create. You're just going to have a miserable life, basically.
Yeah, you're just, these systems are so powerful. They're so arrayed against you.
Right, and I'm thinking about it. I come from a strong Anabaptist tradition. My roots are Mennonite, and I know the history of the Mennonites that my family was a part of. They're not Amish, but they're Mennonite brethren. And it goes back to Russia and then to Germany and to Holland. And they are people that, because of their belief in baptism as an adult, were persecuted across the board by the Calvinists, by the Lutherans, by the Catholics, and which caused them to have to move around and find, places of safety and security. And so they migrated finally to Russia. And everywhere they went, it was a hostile environment. But what they did extremely well, and you can see this, maybe to a fault in the Amish even today, who are part of that branch of that movement, is the ability to create community. Mennonites have always created community, and they built schools, they created rules, and they said, this is how we're going to live, and they flourished. In fact, they flourished so much that eventually they would have to be relieved, because the Russians looked over and said, the Bolsheviks looked at it and said, you've got land, you've got money, you've got tools, we want those. And so they moved to the United States and to Pennsylvania and Kansas and Oklahoma. But it's a picture of a group of people who said, okay, we can't change Russia, but we can live here. And we can influence what we can influence, which is our own lives, our family life, our neighbors' lives, our little towns' lives. And if you go through the US, you see lots of flourishing communities that may be in states that have non-flourishing communities. And you got to ask, why is that community flourishing and not the next one? So I disagree. I think we can work at it. I think we can create communities that, no matter what, that work for us. We can at least try.
Yeah, I love your example of the Mennonites, Dwight, because in community development, our study of community development,
Brazil was another example.
What's that?
The Brazilian example where
there's many where a persecuted minority that was really persecuted and had nothing, like literally had just the clothes on their back, and they would go into a place like some of these exiles went to. I can't remember. It was in Brazil. Yeah, they went to this.
Yeah, the Chiapas.
Brazil. That was basically a swamp.
Oh, it was a jungle.
It was
swamp.
Mosquito infested, and you would think, it would be so easy for them to say, there's nothing we can do, we're just overwhelmed. But what they did, because they had this biblical view of the importance of the individual and human agency and the fact that God created them to.
And they were a community
to flourish, right?
And they were a community.
They were a community.
And they needed to work.
What do we have here? What can we do with what we've got? No matter how small or how, kind of seemingly inadequate. And they started with that, and they built incredibly flourishing communities, and I think it does come down to this. A lot of it comes down to this idea, that that we have agency, that we can do something, we can change, we can make a change, even despite really hostile or difficult circumstances that surround us. And I just think you're right, Dwight. I think that's something that I'm very concerned about with the ideology of social justice. Is it just moves you away from this biblical idea to this idea that if things are going to change for you, somebody else has to do it. Some system or structure has to change around you because ultimately you can't do it. And I just think that's a really destructive message for anyone who wants to see people come out of poverty and brokenness. So, Jeff, what are you hearing in all this?
Well, I may resent you, Scott, for how much I know about this now. Well,
why would you resent me?
But maybe I'm grateful. I'm not sure. So what I'm hearing is, this goes back to you mentioning persecuted communities that are really persecuted, and then tying it into critical race theory. And again, when I talk about critical race theory, and there's so many people, this is, again, the power of worldview. There's so many people that, and I witnessed this even in some of your conversations, Scott, some of the conversations I have, where we talk past each other because there's people that are well motivated and are taking aspects of it. And we talk past each other because you're saying this is a comprehensive ideology. I mean, this is a religion, and they're going, this is a tool I use. So we're not even understanding, right, what we're talking about. We don't have a mutual understanding of that. But within those tools, right, if you take them back to their foundations, one of those foundations is that when there is a gap, it is only due to those external forces, the oppression, the systemic racism.
Forces in the culture of the society, right?
External forces do create gaps. Specific forces such as racism can and does create gaps. But what invalidates that tool further downstream from that foundation is that that's not the only thing that creates those gaps. And that's where the moral, the individual agency can fill that gap, right? So when you're talking about it's so it can be so well intentioned to close this gap because of compassion that we have, but it's almost like you couldn't pick a more impotent way to try to fill that gap than saying, let's wait for all of this to be filled by changes in the external forces.
Yeah, it makes the individual kind of a zero. It puts them in a passive role.
Well, especially if we say solution is the government. Sorry, but if we hand it off to someone way outside our control, which is a government official, and say he's now responsible for the well-being of my life.
Yeah.
God help us. No,
and I heard recently a Christian talking about the need for intermediary institutions, and I think that's part of our call as Christian, right? To build good things that bless those around us. Right? But this outsourcing of everything and this expectation of deliverance from... I did a little research yesterday. I thought, I wonder, because I was thinking about, the fact that we build nonprofits in the United States like no other nation has ever built them. And I thought, I wonder how many we have. And I Googled it, 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States.
And the very best one is the Disciple Nations Alliance.
And if you'd like to make sure we still have 1.5 million...
1.5 minus one, yeah.
No,
but just think about it. These are people who says, I can make a difference by getting together with my friends, and we're going to influence something. We're going to make some place. And yeah, the government's huge in our country, and it's growing, but 1.5 million nonprofits, that's amazing. So...
I want to come back to Dwight. I think of you, because Dwight's a guy who's very creative, loves to make things, loves to build things. And there's God wired us to have such deep satisfaction when we function according to that line of his. He's creative. God created the universe with his spoken word. And then he created us in his image to create, to make things, to take initiative, to make things. And actually, he holds us accountable for our decisions too. but there's such satisfaction that comes, from creating new things, whether it's a nonprofit or if it's just taking a piece of dirt in the backyard and making a beautiful garden,
Well, and
whatever it is.
you see this in a 5-year-old already. There's satisfaction in learning how to read. Oh my goodness, and learning math for the first time. Doing
or drawing a picture, look what I did. Yeah.
you see great
Right.
satisfaction as people develop and grow and use those gifts. And to say that
That's
doesn't
right.
matter now, that doesn't count, or it can't happen because that's so sad.
Yeah, no, we really do need to, that's such a beautiful, powerful thing. It just has to be, if we really want to see broken communities flourishing, it has to be a key part of what we teach and what they understand about themselves, is that their lives matter, they count, and they can make a huge impact.
And I think we have a bit of moral authority as the DNA, because apart from the United States and the problems we're going through right now in terms of the racial divide and ethnicity issues, we have witnessed our friends and neighbors across the world seeing the power of ideas in their context. So we're not arguing from, we're 3 white guys in America that think this is right. No, we have actually got to see the impact it's had in Nigeria, in Irian Jaya, whatever, in terms of people's communities and their lives. And so that's encouraging.
Just to wrap this up a little bit, because we're getting close to it, but this is just one idea. There's so many ideas, so many ideas that come out of both ideological social justice and the biblical worldview, either lead to flourishing or the opposite. So this idea, is just simply this idea that the individual matters, that God created every individual with the capacity and the ability to impact the world. And critical theory, social justice, it moves in the direction of kind of denying the importance of the individual, because it says you're a product of your group, race, sex, sexual orientation, and then it puts all those groups into this kind of continuum of being either oppressors or oppressed. And if you're in an oppressed group, there's not a lot you can do, except change the systems or rig things around in such a way that you can get out of that. But the biblical worldview says, no, ultimately, the groups that we're a part of, they shape us, they matter, but they do not define us. We're defined by God because we're made by him in his image, and we have creativity, agency, and responsibility.
Scott, I'd invite you right now to maybe make an off-the-cuff rally cry for those listening. And this goes to the conversations we've been having, and it goes back to my first the prompt I mentioned at the beginning, not just being anti-social justice, but being pro-biblical justice. This is a boots on the ground moment. Christians should have their hands dirty all the time, right? We should be working. Ideas have consequences when they're put into action. And so I think, as you and I have had conversations recently, our heart is because it's very important, especially from the DNA, right? We talk about ideas. And so we want to make sure that the right ideas are out there, that the problems are diagnosed the right way so that they get the right treatment. And so that's why it's important. That's why you've tackled this on an ideological level, right? That's why we're talking doctrine, but we're looking forward to how this manifests itself, right? Practically. So maybe Dwight, and if you have anything either, what's in your heart? What do you hope to see from a boots on the ground Christian response as we move forward?
I just think it's not too hard, Jeff. I think if you're working in the context of poverty in a community, inner city, overseas, you've got to make sure that a key part of what you're teaching in that context is the importance of the individual, that the person because often especially if they're very poor, they've experienced a lot of brokenness in their lives. They don't see it. They don't see how, they're blind to the fact that they can come out of that, or that their life can matter. And so just that God created you. He created you uniquely. He gave you unique gifts, unique talents and abilities that aren't just for you, but for your community. Other people need you, and you can use those gifts and those abilities to make your world a better place and to make the world a better place. If that message isn't being taught or emphasized, then you're playing against a basic principle of community development. So that's a boots on the ground kind of a thing. I mean, that just has to be a part of what we're teaching. If you're a parent in the home, you teach that to your kids. Your life matters. God created you with unique gifts and with a purpose. And He's given you a role to play in His big drama, and nobody else is going to play that role except you. And so you've got to educate yourself. You've got to prepare yourself to play the role that God's given you to play. Not just so you can make a lot of money, but so that you can be a part of what God's doing in this world to see it flourish and grow. So yeah, that's not too complicated, is it, Jeff? But I just think, unless that idea is being sown intentionally, you're not going to get biblical justice and community flourishing.
Dwight, you can just say amen if you don't want to be put on the spot
Amen.
for the last word, or you can close us up. Amen from Dwight. Okay,
Amen.
So if you're listening, if you're watching, and you just somehow sat through an hour talking about worldview and its consequences, but still don't know what we're talking about, we invite you to engage with our resources. You can find many of them on our website at disciplenations.org, but our flagship resource for you is our free online biblical worldview training school called Coram Deo, CORAMDEO.com. You can sign up for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you can take our basics course, which helps you understand the power of worldview, what a worldview is, what the biblical worldview is, how to identify and replace counterfeit lies, how to apply all of that. It's a great resource. Version 2.0 is coming out very soon. Stay tuned for that. If you like what you see, if you like what you hear, if you want to help us equip you and others, you can donate at disciplenations.org/donate, or just on the homepage. There's a donate button right on the top as well. We appreciate that. Dwight, since we got an amen from you, would you mind praying us out?
All right.
Brief prayer, and then we'll say goodbye.
A brief prayer. All right. Father, thank you for this opportunity. And Father, we humbly ask you for wisdom in terms of how to know you better, to love one another better, and to serve our world better. Father, we confess our failures. We just ask for wisdom and knowing how to love better in terms of doing what's right to help others flourish as you designed them to flourish. Thank you for your goodness and your grace, your spirit that empowers us, and for your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for watching. If you're out there and you want some of your iron to sharpen our iron, then please, you can email us at info@disciplenations.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what you just heard. And I will see it. I'll make sure the rest of the team sees it. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next time and maybe hear from you in the meantime. God bless.